So hello, my name is Sean Wilson. I'm a physician with the Canadian military, and prior to doing that, I was a soldier in the Canadian Forces for about 10 years. And I'm also a parent and a spouse and a whole lot of other things. That's me in a nutshell. So over the course of my life and my career, I've dealt with a lot of really difficult experiences, as you can imagine, deploying to combat several times, working as a physician sort of through the pandemic in a critical care setting, and being a healthcare provider for some of our nation's elite forces and military members. Some of those burdens that I've carried with me have really left a mark. And I don't hesitate to tell people that I have a PTSD diagnosis as well, and living with that and seeing the impact on my own health and my mental health, the way I parent, the way I show up as a partner, and the way that I show up at work was a really heavy burden. And I think I just eventually came to a point where I realized that I needed to make some changes for myself, and engaged in medical care, engaged in therapy, and part of my process was working with Camp Aftermath as a participant in one of the rows, and also in that being open to some novel experiences. And one of the things that I've tried more recently with Maria is both Reiki and hypnotherapy. And for me, as a healthcare professional, we definitely have a culture of everything has to be scientific and evidence-based, and I definitely inherited that attitude, and I'd be being dishonest if I didn't say I came to the table as a little bit of a skeptic. But I think that openness to new experiences, you need to believe that change is possible both in yourself and in other people if you hope to get better. And sometimes that means being open to things that a younger, more cynical version of you might not have been open to, and sort of experiencing that. And I think for me, it's definitely opened some doors that I wouldn't have opened on my own. And a lot of that is about trusting somebody. And for myself, and I think for a lot of veterans with PTSD, the idea of allowing somebody close to you in your personal space with your eyes closed and trying to relax is a skill that you've totally lost, that you kind of cast by the wayside at some point along your journey. And I think for me, that was one of the most impactful things, was there's a way that I can do this, and there's a way that I can talk about these experiences, and that I can learn to be in the world that I've just kind of lost. And this is one of the inroads back for me. So it's really had an impact on how I can kind of sit in stillness, and in how I'm able to sit with myself and be open to the fact that it can be okay to be trusting after you've been hurt. So I think prior to trying this, I'd done conventional therapy and still do, and that's something that I think has really worked for me as well. But part of expanding my horizons is that idea that I need to try some novel things, because everything you try will take you to a certain point, and being open to an experience like Reiki or like hypnotherapy for me was very much unexplored territory. And somebody that I really trust put it really well, and that's PTSD or a lot of anxiety disorders are really disorders of avoidance, and not being able to sit with something that's new or something that makes you uncomfortable, to be offered the opportunity to do that in a safe environment with somebody that I trust, and have these experiences now that I can look back on and be it's okay, it's safe to try something, even if it's not necessarily something that I would have at 25 or 35 been this is right up my alley. And to be able to look back on that now, it really does change the way you approach things. And I found that I'm a little more gentle in talking to people that I love in my life, and I'm a little more gentle around ideas that I would have pushed back on, and I think having a certain amount of willingness to reconsider the way you think about things shows you that it's possible to change, that you don't have to be sort of a prisoner of your experiences, a prisoner of your diagnosis, a prisoner of your pathology. It's little steps, but you can move past it, So I'd say for me, I remember really vividly sitting down for sort of my first in-person experience. I'm in this chair and I close my eyes, and I just have really no idea what's going to happen. And for somebody that's lived a lot of the experiences that I've lived, like that's very, very unsettling. Like you're very used to the idea that you need to protect yourself, you need to protect your personal space, sort of things like that. And I look at how that felt then, and I look at, many sessions down the road, and I do find that there are little things that I didn't even really appreciate, like having somebody I love close to me who will like come behind me and like give me a hug or something like that. That my first reaction was always to kind of get my shoulders back up. And I'm doing that a bit less now. And it doesn't mean that tendency goes away. It doesn't mean that you sort of lose those experiences that you've had. But I guess the biggest change that I've seen in these months is that I am like rediscovering a little bit of what it's like to be gentle. And the other therapy, the other sort of medical solutions and other things that I've pursued have helped me enormously. And I mean, really have changed my life. And I would count this as part of that. And I would say, yeah, that this opened my mind to the possibility that like, no matter how scientific and considered I am about something, that I can be wrong, and I can be wrong in a way that's wonderful instead of wrong in a way that's scary. So yeah, that's that I think for me is one of the biggest differences. I can be a little tiny bit more at peace, and the impact that has on my relationships and just how I feel in the world and the day-to-day is huge. So I guess if I had to speak back to myself before I started this, or somebody with a similar level of skepticism, and just really to be clear, like, I was probably about as skeptical as a person could be. I mean, coming from a very, sort of, I guess, at least in my military history, a very like real is real, violence is violence, physicality is physicality. And then in medicine, the most important thing is everything has to be perfectly scientific. I don't know that anything other than being in the presence of somebody that I trusted would have convinced me that this was a modality that would have worked for me. And when I read on Reiki and when I read on hypnotherapy, one of the things that I discovered is a lot of veterans sort of medical care clinics have it in their recommendations. So Veterans Affairs in the US will fund it, other such organizations. And I think you can be of two minds about this and still get benefit. So you can really delve into like the spiritual practice and the spiritual component, and you'll see benefit from that. Or you can look at this as a way of retraining your brain, retraining your body, and all of the rest of those things to be at peace with stillness, with somebody in your space, with all these things that like would have been physically activating to me for most of my life. There's a way to rewire that, and how you individually process that, even if you're looking at this through the lens of skepticism, can be through a scientific lens, it can be through a spiritual lens, but either way, I think there's benefit in it. And I guess I can speak to the change that it's made for me. And I think approaching something like this with an open mind does more than just give the benefits that this can provide. It allows you to be a little more open-minded and maybe a little more open to new experiences in the world. And that's so crucial for people that have these sort of experiences and these sort of traumas,